On this episode, I'm here at the Monroeville Mall, the site of the film classic George Romero's Dawn of the Dead. So it's been 45 years or so it's gonna look pretty different, but we're gonna go check it out while we're watching zombies fight things, a variety of things, in fact, because we're looking at 10 movies where it is things versus zombies. And so let's go into the mall and see if we can resist putting our arms in blood pressure machines while we find out what those 10 things are gonna be.
Number 10. Okay, let's kick this off by going back to 1818 with 2012's Abraham Lincoln versus Zombies. This is from the Asylum and was one of their classic mockbuster flicks, hoping to cash in on the same year's Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. And although every single thing about the previous sentence makes me die a little, Bill Oberst Jr. rolls in as Lincoln and things are looking up. I love Bill because he's a legitimately solid actor and yet shows up in crap like this and Krampus, the Christmas devil, and like Scary or Die, but he always gives it all he's got. Apparently, he agreed to this role on the condition that he could deliver the Gettysburg Address, and they said yes. Lincoln gets word on zombie infections causing problems on the battlefield in the Civil War, and Abe proves himself to be quite the undead killer, and he leads a crew out on the hunt. Weirdly, the guy we saw earlier was pretty fast, but these ones are shamblers. They end up meeting with Stonewall Jackson, who has the most convincing beard I've ever seen, and it's pretty slow going, and when stuff does happen, it's hilarious because there's like a small handful of zombies and they're moving so slow it seems impossible for the humans to get caught. But they do. Somehow, they do. And yeah, for a low-budget period piece, it at least does some nice stuff. There's a ton of necessary costuming and props that all work well enough, and Oberst kills it as Abe, but there's really nothing special here. The movie is slower than the zombies that are in it, I guess except when the script needs them to be. Fast forward to the Abe speeches. Skip the rest. Number 9. We're gonna go now to 2015's Navy SEALs vs. Zombies, which was directed by Stanton Barrett, a pretty accomplished stuntman, and it's his only directing job to date. There's a team of course, Navy SEAls, and we're in Baton Rouge, and Rick Fox is the vice president. A full-on zombie outbreak just kinda starts, and these are the running and jumping variety, so they call in the squad. The commander is the Dudikoff, and Eureka Guy is here, and they get sent in to retrieve the VP. They're sent in to Baton Rouge. They state this several times. I reiterate this point because on Netflix, this movie ran as Navy SEALs: The Battle for New Orleans.
At least they're in the same state.
They find the VP and some other survivors, and it's revealed that it's an unleashed biovirus, and I guess they're not technically zombies because they're not actually dead, but they're zombie enough. This one was shot on $1 million, which doesn't sound like much compared to the Marvel movies, but Abe Lincoln vs. Zombies was done on $150,000, so compared to that, this is a Hollywood blockbuster, but yet they still just have random shots of cars driving around and just normal people chilling in the background, even though the city is supposed to be overrun by zombies. Like, these people just doing some shopping. Also want to point out that they really went the extra mile with this one to make basically every single female character either manipulative and deceptive or just completely ineffective. The SEALs have to try to find the source of the infection, and yeah, you could just call this one macho dudes walking through the city with guns, because that's about 75% of this one. It's 2 movies in, and I'm starting to think that zombie movies have just become, hey, we have to get from point A to point B, but there's zombies there. And I'm not saying that can't be great because, Train to Busan, but well, this ain't no Train to Busan. It's more like Hummer to Baton Rouge.
Or New Orleans. Whatever.
I think the filmmakers were like, the audience we're making for doesn't do that whole geography thing. Number 8. Next up is 2014's Pro Wrestlers vs. Zombies, which begins with backstage wrestler guy very clearly not kissing this girl, and that guy later dies in the ring. How do we know that he died?
Oh my God, Billy's dead!
Billy's brother Angus is quite angry about this, so he conjures up a demon to get revenge. That involves bringing up a zombie, which results in this guy, who is standing right next to a door, the front door, the door that he literally just walked in through, to jump out a window to escape. So bear with me here because my wrestling knowledge pretty much stops with Hulk Hogan and Mr. T in WrestleMania.
Like, what's the point after Andre the Giant died?
So I don't really know wrestlers, but Wikipedia tells me that this is Shane Douglas, real-life wrestler, and this movie has tons of people playing themselves. Well, Douglas is the main target, and the guy holding the big wrestling match is Cody Knotts, the film's director and writer, playing himself as well, and they're having a big throwdown in an old abandoned prison. And Rowdy Roddy is here, and I don't need Wiki to know him. I don't understand this interaction though. They see a woman who is said to know someone.
She's it Premier's older brother.
You bet.
She knows Carney. You know Carney?
You speak English?
That was a shot.
Like, was that a comeback to something? What does that even mean? I mean, was it that he's like so dumb that he doesn't understand English? I mean, but what he said was perfectly understandable and perfectly reasonable question.
All the wrestler characters are all shown to be assholes except Roddy, and there's zombies in the prison. And this guy is Kurt Angle, who's actually from Pittsburgh, and this was shot just outside of it.
Pittsburghers know how to kill the undead.
We do. I actually have that on my resume under special skills.
Kurt gets chomped and becomes a zombie. Oh, and 2x4 guy, I know him, that's Hacksaw Jim Duggan. These zombies apparently don't know how to get into a wrestling ring, I guess, and this guy with dreads is someone called Facade. And this is Matt Hardy, who I'm told is a bigger name wrestler, and oh boy, is this some amateur filmmaking. It's like goofy staging, blocking, shot compositions, awkward performances, the whole works. It's all pretty wrong. But here's a tip for filmmakers, although sadly it's a tip that's too late, but putting Rowdy Roddy in basically anything makes me like it about 5 times more. It's pretty silly watching wrestlers take on the zombies by using wrestling moves, and even funnier watching the zombies follow the wrestling rules and setting the moves up and patiently waiting to attack one by one. And, well, I already said this is terrible, and it is, but I still had some fun watching it. But then it just kept going. It doesn't totally sustain its wackiness, but it mostly kept me amused. Number 7. I may regret this one, but here's 2015's MILFs vs. Zombies, released by Troma. And we're told that an undead invasion has already begun, attacking people in the park, including this girl that I recognize from Death Escort Service.
And nope. Stop. Not gonna have a flashback. Keep it together. Keep it together.
We meet our MILFs that just look like regular horror movie leads, but they talk about having kids, so I guess they're MILFs? There's also these 3 guys going to a party where everyone is dressed in fetish gear, and there's a lot of attempts at humor, I guess. It's like a really obvious attempt to make a Troma-style movie without actually having the writing or skill level usually found in a Troma movie, if you're gonna call it that, which I am. There's hilarious jokes like calling an Asian woman Yoko and dim sum, and then having her fart.
Get it? It's a joke.
The infection starts to spread, even if the comedy never does, and it keeps cutting back to the MILFs as they just argue back and forth. They have Lloyd playing a news guy, but don't actually do anything, but just have him at his regular desk and throw a little 4 news thing down in the corner, I guess, to make it look like a newscast?
It's like the epitome of laziness.
The acting is dreadful. and some parts seem to be a little more polished than other, like a 10% increase in quality. Like this image almost looks like film, but then everything else looks like super cheap camcorder video. The budget is an estimated $1,500, which seems high, actually. And yeah, if you consider zombies eating a woman while she tells them to choke on the herpes, then I guess this one's for you. And see, this is the problem. I like Troma. I try to defend Troma when I can. The problem is that when I talk about Troma, I'm talking about things like Terra Firma, or Tromeo and Juliet, or even the golden days of Toxie and Troma's War, or even their licensed stuff. That's what I mean. But when most people think about Troma, they're thinking of this. Try hard, gross out, edgelord humor. And Chauncey Phillips is even here for just a random throwaway scene as usual, and the MILFs don't even face off against the zombies until like an hour in, and then you look and you realize there's 45 minutes left, and you realize that all the light has left the world. And then it takes a turn into extremely explicit content, and then for some reason there's a merman, and I'll admit I laughed at the Chris Seaver cameo.
What in the... Dios mío! What in the cat's-eyed cosmos? Don't eat me, bro! You look like a vagina! And I hate vaginas, because they look like Willem Dafoe!
But that may be the only time in the whole movie, and this just gives Troma a bad name.
I mean, worse name.
Number 6. Let's hope for some improvement with 2014's Cowboys versus Zombies, and we're set in an old west town that has disposable lighters and modern music and clothing. There's this gunslinger on a hunt for someone named McDermott, and it soon becomes clear that this is actually meant to be the future and some sort of post-apocalyptic dealie, and there's all sorts of trouble. And the first thing you're going to notice here is that this one takes itself very, very seriously. You're also going to notice that the movie is a third done, and there's no zombies so far. But then a lone rider strolls into town, bringing with him a horde of the undead. But first, there's gonna be a lot of speeches given, because he's the devil come to claim the gunslinger's soul. If he doesn't go with the devil, the zombies will destroy the town, unless they can survive until dawn. They all board themselves up in the saloon and prepare to defend it, and here's the weird thing about this one. It's on IMDb as Cowboys vs. Zombies, releasing in 2014, listing Carmelo Follow as the writer-director. Oddly, there's no cast list or anything, and just has a budget of $5,000 listed, and that's it. But it looks like it's also there as Devil's Crossing, released in 2011 and written and directed by James Ryan Gary. And I'm assuming that one is actually correct since it has more information listed on the page, but I guess I'm not totally sure. Shadrach has been working as a soul collector for the devil, and this is his way of quitting. And I don't know, I like that this one tries something different, and if the budget actually is $5,000, then I'll give them a bunch of credit for being very ambitious. And there's definitely some fun to be had in the Assault on Precinct 13 style finale, but man, does it take a while to get there. Number 5. We're now jumping to 2011's Humans versus Zombies. Yes!
Humans versus zombies. Yeah, very clever concept. I mean, how many movies have you seen where the zombies are facing humans?
I guess the unusual title is due to this movie being a sort of adaptation of a game. It seems that there's a live-action role-playing game that's been played for a handful of years on college campuses, which I'm unaware of since I went to college in the 1920s. In the game, some players are zombies and others are humans, and the human players must be on the lookout and protect themselves with socks and dart guns, and if they're tagged, they become zombies. We're set on a college campus and students are playing the game, and there's discussion on the news about an outbreak that they think that they contained, and great value Jack Black is here, and the girl who was bit in the beginning starts to infect other people. And of course, we're treated to lots of drama from our cast, and seriously, when they hired this guy, did they just sit him down and say, do you know who Jack Black is? And this guy was like, oh yeah, I can do that. And they were like, okay, but how much more Jack Black can you be? And he said,
The answer is none. None more Jack Black.
the outbreak spreads, and thankfully Super Security Guard is here, and he's apparently a fan of Pitch Black.
Looks clear. Let's go.
I thought you said it was clear.
I said it looked clear.
Well, how's it look now?
Looks clear.
And I want to say something about low-budget zombie flicks and how they often fail to really capture the fear aspect of a horde of zombies, since for the most part they can't afford that big of a cast. Pretty much every movie on this list so far has suffered from it, with none of them featuring more than like 5 to 10 zombies on screen at any given time. Old school zombie movies would usually have crowds of dozens of zombies coming after you, emphasizing their threat a little more. And I guess since this was done on a college, they were able to get more volunteers, because there's a few scenes here with plenty of undead on screen, which is nice to see, although in the end it's a pretty standard zombie film. The whole element of the game doesn't even really matter to the plot. It's just a gimmick to title the movie and start the movie off, and then never factors in again. It's alright and has a handful of nice moments and super distracting Jack light gray. I'll also say that it makes the odd choice of, in the final 10 minutes of the movie, introducing a new character to sit down and discuss religious ramifications. Number 4. Here's the matchup you've been waiting for, and it's 2004's Vampires vs. Zombies, which is apparently also titled Carmilla the Lesbian Vampire. It opens with a pretty comedic zombie encounter with some very realistic sound effects. There's news reports about a strange infection going around, and then Brink Stevens shows up, and she's with a woman named Carmilla, who I'm going to assume is a lesbian vampire. And there's this guy hunting them, leading to this top-notch fight scene. There's lots of scenes of people driving and talking on their cell phones, to the point that I want to say that it's about 40% of this movie. But then if you're gonna have your film be about Carmilla the lesbian vampires, then you'd better have some sex scenes on the side of the road in a car in the middle of the day, like lesbians do. They institutionalized Jenna and I guess used reagent on her or something, or is that a dream? I don't know. Zombies finally arrive with like 15 minutes left in the movie to go, and this one's like barely a movie. It's hardly coherent, and I feel like this might have been meant to be like part 3 or part 4 of a series, because I think I was supposed to know who characters were, but yeah, it's one of the rougher ones in this patch. Number 3. Alright, how about 2012's Cockneys vs. Zombies? If by chance you don't know what Cockneys are, it's an English accent and dialect, mostly from East London, and gives us a construction crew who find an old buried crypt and then get attacked. And there's 2 brothers, including Victor Frankenstein, planning on a big robbery. And old Ray is here, and it's the closing down of his senior home. And the Bionic Woman is also here, and the heist just does not go well. Luckily for them, I guess, the zombies show up and start the chaos, and one of the old folks is Pussy Galore. And these are slow zombies, like slow enough to have a hard time catching up to a guy with a walker. When their crazy friend turns, they have trouble putting him down due to the steel plate in his head, which is something I'm not sure I've seen before. And the boys have to get back to the old folks' home to save their granddad, and honestly, it's the characters that make this a touch above the rest. It's a bit standard, with the same old get from point A to point B while having to get through a bunch of zombies, but it's fun enough. There's a couple of things to establish it as being uniquely English, as per the title, with brawling hooligans and double-decker buses, and honestly, the movie really picks up anytime they focus on the seniors, so the finale thankfully includes all of them. But it's not like essential viewing or anything, even if it is a pleasant diversion, but it does have one of my favorite all-time ending theme songs. Number 2. So in 2008, there was going to be a movie called Strippers vs. Zombies, but it was changed to Zombie Strippers instead. But there was another one that still kept part of the title, and it was Zombies, 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 Strippers vs. Zombies, which was also just released as Strippers vs. Zombies. Tiffany Shepis is here, and which is in a part that is revealed to just be a movie a kid is watching, and this one was directed by Jason Murphy, who would then go on to direct a bunch of kids' movies. And this doc also has some reagent, because in movies now, if they want to convey the fact that your scientist is a mad scientist, you give him a glowing green syringe. This creepster steals some of the doc's stuff, and he smokes it with a prostitute who works right outside of a strip club. There's a rivalry between the dancers and the prostitutes, and the drug kicks in to the expected effect, so they all hide in the club. The infection spreads, and they have to make their way back to the lab to find the doctor in order to reverse the effects. Maybe this is a silly complaint, but again, the fact that the characters are strippers doesn't really seem to matter too much to the story. It's just a standard bunch of people holed up in a building with zombies outside kind of thing. It just happens to be a strip club. The movie also has one of the stealthiest zombies of all time, with this one that attacks the doc. Like, there are two people who are standing next to him, looking right at him, and no one saw this zombie walking up. There's nowhere from behind that it could have approached. The only direction it could have come from is from back here, and that's exactly where these people are positioned towards looking.
Are they just kind of tunnel visioned?
It's fine enough, it doesn't take itself too seriously, but it also isn't trying to be funny too hard. Like there's a bit with a pimp who fights the zombies by pimp slapping them repeatedly, but he never calls attention to it, and it's treated mostly seriously, which, I don't know, it makes it funny to me, I don't know. And it has a pretty unexpected, although maybe a little too CG heavy finale. It's not a good movie, but I still got a mild kick out of it. Number 1. Our final movie on the list is the last movie on the list, just with the title reversed. We've seen plenty of things versus zombies, but now it's time for the zombies to be billed first with 2012's Zombies vs. Strippers. This one is from Full Moon, and we've got the sleazy strip club owner, and he watches this kids show with a host named Hambo, an old dude with a pig nose, and this was his first appearance, but he'd go on to appear in a whole string of further Full Moon movies. The news was reporting a mysterious illness going on, so you know what that means. And Spider decides to close the club since it's losing money, and they decide to have one last party night. The zombies start to attack, and they talk, calling for brains, and are kind of fast, but also kind of slow. This one is directed by Alex Nicolau, the son of regular Full Moon director and the guy from the Subspecies series and TerraVision, Ted Nicolau. It was Alex's feature debut, and he'd go on to do a bunch more work for Full Moon, but he hasn't directed again except for one of their clip tape movies. Biker dudes show up, and this guy is played by Brad Potts, who's been in a few other Full Moon movies, and somewhere on one of my hard drives I have footage of this guy laughing while holding up a chicken egg.
Do not ask.
It takes far longer here for the zombie action to unfold than it did in Strippers vs. Zombies, and weirdly, and keep in mind these are estimates from IMDb, so they might not be accurate, but this movie had a budget of $500,000 versus the $30,000 of Strippers vs. Zombies, but somehow this feels cheaper? Like if you're expecting a zombie invasion, you're gonna get like 3 or 4 undead on screen at most until the finale with like 10 or 15. Like that's a massive horde or something, and oh, a Michael Jackson zombie joke.
In 2012. How topical.
So yeah, this was in the era of Full Moon's sharp decline and fits because it's really not that great. And with such a similar plot, I preferred the previous film to this one.
So there you have it, 10 movies that all are the zombies fighting things. I'm kind of shocked at how little the Monroeville Mall looks like it did when the movie was made. I actually used to work here when I was younger, so it is sort of a weird flashback in a way. But yeah, I don't know, I hope you enjoyed these movies. If you've seen some of them, let me know. If you know some other zombies versus things movies, please click those in the comments down below. If you like this video, please click the like button. If you like what you see on the channel, of course, subscribe as well too. Check out the Patreons at patreon.com. I got my list of patrons over there on the side. You can go there and help support the channel. It's patreon.com/movietimelines. Appreciate that. And yeah, me and George will see you very shortly for another great video. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.